Now we move on to another Roman find. I don't know what's wrong with me this month. I seem to have bought into the Romans in a big way this month. There's something wrong with me.
You mean the
It's the heat
fountainhead
stroke.
of the European, the fountainhead of Western European culture, you mean?
No, next
The,
month it's
the Greco-Roman hegemony, which is
next month it's all going to be prehistory. Mark my words. But no, this month this story really came to my attention. It's a lovely story of the smallest of finds revealing a much larger story. And in that sense, not only is there a Roman thread in these segments this month in the Watching Brief, but also there's a common element of the tactile and the personal nature of discovery as well. There was an archaeologist called Peter Moore was doing his MA, digging at Chedworth Roman Villa in Gloucestershire, and came across in 2017 a 1,800-year-old fragment of glass that was very, very, no doubt, very immediately pretty. I found similar glass, although obviously not this special, on while excavating at say Binchester, and it immediately stands out from the soil around it. You know, the light glints on it. You wonder for a moment if it might be a diamond. You know, no, I'm only joking. It stands out from the rest, from the bone and the pottery and this kind of thing. And what's special about this fragment, though, is as small as it is it had an intricate design on it. It had a sort of a the type of thing you might find on a pastry. You know, where you sort of had dark lines of icing on top of a field of white icing, and you scrape through those lines to make a
it's called
wavy pattern.
combed decoration, Mark.
Combed decoration. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. I I wasn't reaching. I was describing what I was seeing. Yes, it's got that sort of combed decoration going on, and you can hardly blame Peter for wondering what this thing was. And it turns out that uh, I believe Peter was working at the University of York at the time, and it turns out that there is a comparable piece that's actually stored in New York, and that is at the let's make sure I get this correct, at the
Corning Museum of Glass.
that's it, the Corning Museum of Glass. Excellent, thank you very much. Yes, where it turns out that this was a fish. This was a little glass fish bottle.
In fact,
That,
it's the only comparable example as well
yeah,
that
yeah,
so
it's
far apparently.
a beautifully delicate little thing, and the combed decoration was actually meant to be invoking scales on the body of the fish. And this thing had been made on the near to the Black Sea in the Ukraine and had travelled to Britain. And what's interesting is that so first of all you've got that immediacy, that immediate thing, and you've got a quote here from Peter where he says that uh, the feeling never tires of discovering such things. The memory of recovering this piece of glass will not go away. But also you've got the broader story. You've got the connections that are revealed, and another quote in this instance is that such an exotic thing was brought from so far away underlines the occupants were in touch with the furthest reaches of the Roman Empire and wanted to show off those connections and that influence. It is amazing that such a small fragment has told us so much. So it's the smallest of things that reveals the biggest of things in terms of connections. But also for me, it's very evocative because it reminds me that, as ever, what we imagine as being the Roman world, because it's on this sort of weird cusp where the survivability of these objects diminishes quite dramatically the further back in time you go. The Romans are on the edge of, essentially on the edge of prehistory. Before then, it gets a bit less likely to find this sort of material, and it reminds me that actually not everyone, but certainly it's likely that in Britain there would have been some other objects similar to this that have not survived. It adds a texture and a little insight into Roman life that is akin to the Roman biro that we've examined, the stylus, but also is it's a little flash of colour. It's a trinket that
I was
challenges some more conventional interpretations of the Roman world, I think.
I was going to say absolutely the color in particular is I was going to say because it's actually quite gaudy if you look at the reconstruction.
Yeah.
Which is fine, you know. But also, I mean, technically, it's extremely accomplished. It's the, you know, it's, and you know, we said that the only other example to match this is in a museum in New York, and actually came from a burial in an early burial in the Crimea, dated to the roundabout the turn of BCE AD, and it reminds us, I think, that everybody who studied ancient finds and finds assemblages always asks, how representative is what I'm finding?
Yes.
How representative is what I'm analysing? Yeah. And also we have these views of what the past looked like, and you know, it's there's been a transformation in views of things like events like World War I and World War II, with the discovery of or the colorization of images. World War II increasingly, like, there was a generation that grew up thinking World War II was in black and white because they were watching documentaries on black and white TV showing black and white newsreels. Now that we're showing, actually quite a lot of material was shot in colour, and it's now being shown in colour, and it makes the events seem that much more immediate and real. I remember when Historic England were or English Heritage, in fact, I should say, were doing the reconstruction of the royal chambers at Dover Castle. There were criticisms saying, "Oh, what? It's a stage set, and so on, why, whatever." Because there was this image that the castle was these bare flint walls and vaults, and you know, to actually drape it and furnish it with drapes and furnishes that had sources in medieval manuscripts and things like that was seen as somehow an imposition, when in fact it's giving the visitor a much more a much richer, and say real visceral is the wrong word to use, a much more visceral, much more human experience, because it's something where, you know, Henry II could just have wandered off to the garderobe.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's important as well to I think it's probably going to be important to monitor this though as well, in so much as if I was, you know, in the Roman reenacting community, I'd be very tempted to try and get hold of one of these for my kit. But it'd
I'm
be a real
sure
shame.
There are glass makers who are trying to fabricate it as we speak.
No doubt. But it would be a shame if everyone suddenly had one. You know what I mean? In so much as you see this, so in the Viking community, which I'm much more familiar with, you often see everyone is wearing, you know, the Coppergate helmet, you know, the type site helmet that there's only one of as far as we're aware of, and
it's like all the World War II reenactors who want to, they all want to be paratroopers.
Exactly. You can't have an army of paratroopers, precisely. And so in that sense, it would be a shame if it became, if this was too representative, and if it was suddenly turned up in every museum, or, you know, this kind of, you know what I mean? But nonetheless, it is a nice little texture challenge, and also I like it because it reminds me as well of the TV series Rome, where I remember one of the criticisms for that series back in day was the fact, or the question of, I saw people reviewing it saying, where's the marble, where's the Colosseum, you know, where's Rome, where's Charlton Heston riding round on the Circus Maximus, and actually what Rome was doing was bringing that visceral reality of Rome at that time, before the marble, before Augustus really even, and the effect of what would become an imperial emperor, you know, line of emperors. This was Rome at that cusp of the republic into the empire, what we would call the empire. I don't think the Romans ever really had a word for empire per se, and it was good because of that. It challenged what people thought, and it added a little bit of colour, and even the smell, as it were, you know, of that place. And so these little insights. That's the reason why I was drawn to this, despite it being Roman. it's a lovely little thing.
Actually, a little nerdy inside. If you watch Ben-Hur, and you mentioned Ben-Hur, and it's made very clear actually in the screenplay, it's the circus at Antioch. It's not the circus Maximus where the chariot race takes place.
Sorry.
But no, if you look at Ben-Hur's villa at the beginning of the film, he's clearly an antiques collector, because perched on the side is a copy of one of the alabaster jars. There's a copy. Yeah. It was the review of the film. Loved him, hated her. There's a copy of one of the alabaster jars from the Tomb of Tutankhamun, which they'd used to dress the set.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Watch out for it next time it's on telly, which it is quite regularly.
Nice. You can imagine. You can imagine someone like a props master going to a props house and going, "Yeah, that looks great."
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But also,
We'll have it.
We've got, where they've been clearly picked up, there are instances of stone tools popping up on Roman sites where they've clearly been in contexts, in stratified contexts, where they've some of them may be just casually there, but some of them may well have been picked up. It's the old idea of the hand axes were described, what were once called hand axes, were described as thunderbolts in the past when people found them, picked them up. They were the thunderbolts of the Jupiter's thunderbolts or Thor's thunderbolts.
Little places,
in folklore in places, yeah. But the other thing I think I'd say about this were two things. I mean, first of all, I'd be very interested to hear about the stratification of this, because
the post arriving.
Something's been posted.
Okay.
He's fine. He's collecting it. No, the burial, the analogue for this, is dated to quite around the beginning of the Common Era. But Chedworth is a 3rd, 4th century villa. So the date of this particular object is quite interesting. That may not be being reported fully, so we'll wait and see. But in fact, talking of the reporting, I think the other thing we should say on this is the identification. It's one of the last pieces of work undertaken by the late Professor Jennifer Price, who died in May, before the publication of her paper about this particular piece of glass. But it's a nice tribute too.
Yeah,
so it's something that gave a lot to the sector.
Definitely. And so just to briefly go back a step, then what's interesting there is that this is being dated to around about 1800 years ago, when its counterpart is 2,000 years old-ish. So therefore, could this be possibly an heirloom that's been handed down for a couple of hundred years? Could it be that they're still making them 200 years later?
Exactly. Yeah. And until there's, if there are only two of this particular type, until there's more evidence, who can say? It's a guess.
Yeah. Well, and also 200 years is a long time. That's the other thing as well. Archaeologists are often accused of truncating time, but 200 years ago was a very different time to what it is today. So yeah, interesting.
And fashions in domestic artifacts will change a lot in 200 years.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah.
Potentially could change a lot in 200 years.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So yeah, Roman, but interesting nonetheless. Now we move on.
I give up. I really do.